Belgium, home to delicious buns, artisan chocolates you can't afford, little detectives with dodgy moustaches, oh yeah, and one of the most prolific gun manufacturers of the last 130 years. Today the story of the firearms producing powerhouse that is FN Herstal. Liège had been a gun-making region for centuries. The problem was by the 1880s, it had become a mess of small little workshops. Brilliant, proud, deeply skilled craftsmen, but none of them was big enough to land any serious military contracts on their own. But in 1889, the Belgian government needed to produce 150,000 of the new Mauser model 1889 bolt-action rifles. But not a single Liège workshop on its own could build anything like that many. So roughly a dozen of these firms did the only sensible thing. They swallowed their pride and banded together, forming the National Factory of War Weapons, or, here we go, Fabrique Nationale d'Armes de Guerre. Nailed it? To actually build the factory and get production running, they had to bring in German technical help. Ludwig Loh of Berlin, and Loh ended up effectively controlling the company. The first rifles rolled off the line on New Year's Eve 1891. A licensed German design built by a committee of small builders, run kind of more from Berlin than Brussels. Not exactly a fairy tale start. But then comes kind of an awkward question. What now? The Mauser order got fulfilled, and suddenly nobody's quite sure what FN should be doing. Some of the founders literally wanted it dissolved there and then. So, to survive the lean years, FN diversified into bicycles, then motorbicycles, then cars, then trucks, and, this is true, reportedly, the finest milking machines in all of Belgium. Don't worry, we're getting to the cool stuff. Unless you're a fan of Clarkson's Farm, in which case maybe the milking machines is up your street. Hey guys, I get loads of questions about where I get the replicas I show in my videos, so I just have to give a quick shout out to Patrol Base UK, who supplied this week's cybergun SCAR H. This thing's absolutely stunning, full weight, all the correct external materials, and fully licensed by FN themselves. Patrol Base are the UK's largest airsoft supplier. They sell everything from historical replicas to stuff that's bang up to date. Go check out their website, it's like Candyland. I can lose hours just scrolling around. You can find out more about Patrol Base in the pinned comment below and the link in the description. Thanks guys, back to the video. 1897, FN sales manager, a chap called Hertberg, is over in Hartford, Connecticut, of all places, doing research into bicycle technology, when he bumps into a former acquaintance, a little gun designer you might have heard of, John Moses Browning. Arguably the most important firearms designer who's ever lived. Browning's looking for a partner to build a new self-loading pistol. FN says yes. The deal gets signed on the 17th of July 1897 and it lasts 30 years and turns a struggling little subcontractor making Mausers, then bicycles, then cars and milking machines, into an absolute legend of a firearms powerhouse. What does the partnership produce? Well, first up, there's the FN Browning Model 1900, the first ever production pistol with a slide. It looks quirky now, but in 1900, this was revolutionary, and it was a hugely important stepping stone in firearms production. Without the 1900, we wouldn't get the 1911 or the high power that we'll cover later. Then came the Browning Auto 5 shotgun, a whole string of pocket pistols, and eventually, the heavy hitters that armies would fight for. Kinda literally. Now it should come as no surprise to anyone that guns are easiest to sell when there's major demand. Nothing gets the pew-pews flying out the factory door like a good old war. Kind of ironic then that the largest and bloodiest conflict the world had ever known up to that point should be started by one of FN's creations and wind up almost destroying the company. 28th of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand is shot dead in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip. He fired just 2 shots, but lit the fuse that started the First World War. And the pistol in his hand? An FN Browning Model 1910. There's little I need to say about the Great War, but by the autumn of 1914, Belgium was overrun and the Herstal factory was seized by the Germans. The company once again could have ended right there and then, but it managed to pull off a little survival trick that would come in handy 20 years later. FN simply packed up and moved, quickly, Production got outsourced to a facility over in Birmingham, England, beginning a relationship with Britain that would matter enormously down the line. After the war, FN finally managed to get stripped away from German control and instead got taken over by Belgium financial giant Société Générale de Belgique. I think that's close enough. The company is at last properly Belgium, but it's learnt a lesson and it will never forget. The factory can always be taken, so the knowledge has to be able to move. During the 20s, FN began building the Browning automatic rifle, the BAR, for the USA, whilst also working on a number of other highly influential designs, including the mighty M250 cal. 26th of November 1926, John Browning is at his workbench in Herstal working on a new high-capacity pistol for the French military, and he had a heart attack and died right there, mid-design. They laid out his body in the FN boardroom and the entire plant stopped so that the workers could file past and pay their respects to the man they simply called Le Maître, the Master. But the 9mm masterpiece on his bench was unfinished, so Browning's protégé, Doudé Saïv, had to step up and finish the design. And finish it he did. And well. Saïv took that half-finished pistol and completed it, with his signature contribution being the staggered double-stack magazine holding 13 rounds, almost double the capacity of a 1911 or a Walther P38, and all of it crammed into a grip you could still actually get hold of. In 1935 it was released, and the now legendary Browning High Power hit the market. It went on to be adopted by over 50 countries and became one of the most widely issued military pistols of the entire 20th century. It might not grab quite as many headlines as the 1911 or the Luger, but it's not bad for a gun its designer never lived to see finished. 10th of May 1940, Germany invades Belgium. 18 days later, it's all over, and Belgium, along with Herstal, is occupied again. But this time, FN had a plan, and the timing's almost cinematic. The night before, literally, the night before the occupation began, on the 27th of May 1940, the design plans for the high power were smuggled out of the plant. Saïv and a handful of senior staff escape, eventually making their way to Britain. The Germans captured the factory virtually intact, installed managers from DWM, and forced FN to build the high power for the German military, under the designation Pistole 640. Over 300,000 of them get made under occupation. But those escaped plans reach Canada. The John Ingalls Company of Toronto tools up and starts building the exact same pistol for the Allies. For the SAS, for the SOE, for the OSS, for Commonwealth paratroopers. The same weapon design was being mass-produced for both sides of the World War simultaneously. A German paratrooper and a British commando could be shooting at each other with exactly the same pistol. About the only way you could tell the pistols apart on the battlefield was just the colour of the finish. After the war, FN got set back up in Belgium, and Saïv finally gets to build the gun he's been sketching towards for years. The Fusil Automatique Liège, I think. The FN FAL. First prototyped in 1947, it's a 7.62mm NATO battle rifle so good it earned the nickname that says it all. The right arm of the free world. Kind of crazy to think the FAL was prototyped in 1947, the same year that the AK-47 was adopted. The post-war rush to create new rifles was a heck of a time for firearms design. It's adopted by over 90 nations. Britain builds it under license as the L1A1 SLR. It was the US that pushed for the 7.62mm adoption by NATO over an intermediate cartridge, despite having come up against the fearsome intermediate cartridge STG-44 during the war. But ironically, it was also the US who had one of the worst 7.62 rifles, the M14, and it was also the US who were the first to switch away from 5.56 with the M16 during Vietnam. But the FAL? While most well-funded militaries did eventually switch to lighter 5.56 systems, the FAL remained a frontline rifle right into the mid-80s and can still be found serving with smaller nations to this day. So while the M14 was dropped pretty quickly, the FAL faded more gracefully out of frontline service. It's a Cold War icon, and it earned its nickname, the right arm of the free world. But there's another FN design from the same golden period that is still here, still in frontline service and still essentially unreplaceable. The FN Mag. If FN gets remembered for a single design in 100 years' time, it's going to come to a toss-up between the FAL and the Mag. In the mid-50s, the Swedes go to FN wanting a belt-fed machine gun based on the BAR, something they'd tried but failed to build themselves. The job lands on the desk of Ernest Verveer, who'd taken over from Saev as FN's lead military designer. And what Verveer came up with around 1957 was a stroke of genius. He took the proven, reliable feed system of the wartime German MG42, Hitler's buzzsaw, and married it to the rugged, battle-tested operating mechanism of the Browning BAR, essentially just flipped upside down. The best of German engineering bolted to the best of American design, and assembled by the Belgians into something that's far more than the sum of its parts. The Mitrailleuse Diepol General. The Mag, the L7, the General Purpose Machine Gun, the Gympie, the M240, so good they named it lots of times. Belt-fed, gas-operated, it has a quick change barrel, and it's almost impossible to kill. It runs filthy, it runs scorching hot, it runs in sand, in mud, in snow, in salt spray, and it just keeps on running. Sweden adopted it in 1958, Britain officially adopted it in 61 as the L7, also known as the Gympie, and from there the dominoes just kept falling. The biggest user, unsurprisingly, is the US, who in the 1970s had a bit of a problem. Their coaxial tank machine guns, the M73, were dangerously unreliable. So bad that after the 73 Yom Kippur War, the Israelis basically told the Americans that the things were unfit for purpose and demanded something better. So the US ran a big competitive trial, and the FN Mag didn't just win, it crushed the competition, posting one of the highest reliability results the US Army had ever seen from a machine gun. The Americans adopted it in 77 as the M240. By the mid-90s, the M240B or Bravo variant officially started replacing the older M60 in the infantry role, and it became the standard 7.62 machine gun across the entire US military. Today, the FN Mag has been adopted by, depending who's counting, somewhere north of 80, 90, even 100 different nations, under a dizzying list of names: the L7, the KSP-58, the C6, the Mag-58, the M240, the Bravo, the Gympie. Over 1 million have been built and has served in basically every major conflict of the last 60 years. It's been in service longer than any of the soldiers carrying it have been alive, and it will very likely outlast all the people currently trying to retire it. Militaries keep looking for something to replace it, something lighter, cheaper, something more modern, but most of the time, they just keep coming back. And FN wasn't done there with machine guns. In the late 70s, it produced the Minimi, the lighter 5.56mm belt-fed machine gun that became pretty much the standard squad automatic weapon around the world. The Americans adopted it as the M249 SAW, Britain ran it as the L108 and L1110, eventually over 70 nations used one. So if you've been in almost any NATO military setting since the 50s, well then between the FAL, the Mag, the Minimi, and the high power, it's almost impossible that you haven't handled an FN weapon somewhere. So you'd think with all that military dominance, FN was rolling in money. It wasn't. Because here's the cruel truth about the arms business. Every military wants the best, most well-built, long-lasting gear. But making the best, most over-engineered kit on the planet is a brilliant way to win wars, but a terrible way to stay solvent during peacetime. Being the producer of expensive machine guns that every military wants may sound like the perfect cash cow, but if they're so well built and easy to maintain, then they can be kept in service for multiple decades, even multiple generations, then your cash flow might be less of a river and more of a dried up stream. By the late 20th century, with the Cold War winding down and defense budgets shrinking rapidly, FN was in serious financial trouble. Ownership became a hot potato. Control passed through various hands, including a spell under the French state-owned arms group GIAT. The rescue came in the late 90s when the Walloon regional government stepped in and took control. And to this day, that's who owns FN, the regional government of Wallonia. The company also grew by buying rather than just building. The FN Group ended up owning Browning and the US repeating arms company Winchester, bringing the Browning name all the way back home into the family that had built so much of his work in the first place. By the early 90s, FN did something strange but brilliant. To defeat modern body armor, it didn't just design a new gun, it invented an entirely new cartridge. The tiny, screaming fast 5.7 by 28mm, and it built two weapons around it. The first was the incredibly iconic FN P90, a compact bullpup personal defense weapon with a top-mounted translucent magazine that looks like something out of this world. It was designed for vehicle crews and rear echelon troops who needed real firepower in a tiny, manageable package. The second was its handgun sibling, the 5.7 pistol, firing the same armor-piercing round. The P90's spaceship looks made it the go-to, future-looking gun for film and TV. Sci-fi loved it. Stargate, SG-1, Hunger Games, Looper, and perhaps its most iconic moments, the Secret Service carried them. FN's tiny little PDW that wasn't actually adopted en masse by any military became one of its most recognizable weapons. 2004, US Special Operations Command wants a purpose-built modular rifle, so they ran a competition and FN won it, with the SCAR, the Special Operations Forces Combat Assault Rifle. There were two main flavours, the SCAR L, or Light in 5.56, designated the Mark 16, and the SCAR H, Heavy, also known as the Mark 17. But in June 2010, SOCOM cancelled the Mark 16. The official reason was pretty simple, really. According to them, it just didn't offer enough of a real-world performance advantage over the M4 that they already had. They'd already bought around 850 of them, but operators were told to hand them back. You can find out more about the whole saga in my video up here. But, and credit where credit's due, the SCAR Heavy, the Mark 17 survived, and so did the Mark 20 DMR variant. The 7.62 SCAR found a niche, and the platform went on to be a success worldwide. But in a very recent twist, in October 2025, FN America ended commercial production of the legacy SCAR. So what's FN building now? Well, it still has the brilliant mag, and just released an update package that allows it to take modern optics and night vision without losing zero. But it's got a new machine gun design causing quite the stir, the FN Evolys. Revealed in 2021, it's an ultra-lightweight belt-fed machine gun, around 5.5 kilos, and is up to 30% lighter than the Minimi. Built using polymers and 3D printed components, with one long top rail and fully ambidextrous controls that you can load with a single hand. The whole idea is to give a single soldier machine gun firepower in something that handles like a rifle. French Special Forces ordered it back in 2022, and a French Army contract for up to 5,000 was signed in June 2026. The British Army's also testing it right now. Perhaps they're finally feeling the gap left by dropping the Minimi a while back. There's also the SCAR Mk2, FN's modernised, improved SCAR, with a refined gas system, updated receiver, and better ergonomics. And most recently, the FN ARKA publicly debuted in June 2026. FN's taken its proven, reliable short-stroke gas system out of the SCAR and wrapped it up in a more AR-15 M4 style body. The SCAR's piston reliability in a rifle that feels like what Western militaries have already been training on for decades. The thing is, it might have a bit of an uphill battle against the HK416, which does almost the same job, but with over 2 decades of head start. Many gun companies are remembered for one great design. FN is remembered for many. From a shared workshop in a Belgian town nobody can pronounce, to an unstoppable empire that armed the free world. Not bad for a company that once had to create milking machines just to stay alive. But with modern weapons changing at such a rapid rate now with the rise of drones, hybrid ammunition, and intelligent sights, FN's future won't rely on whether or not it can create great weapons. We know it can. It's whether they can adapt fast enough to produce what militaries need in the 2030s and beyond. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you could give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more, and check out this video here for more great military content.